Minnie Dean, the only woman to be officially hanged in New Zealand, but perhaps a scapegoat for Victorian society's disregard for children born out of wedlock.
Minnie Dean is one of New Zealand's history's most notorious female characters. Her grave here in the Winton Cemetery, long the subject of petty spite. Local legend had it that nothing would grow over her remains, but it was apparently the regular application of weed killer that ensured that this was the case. I have a personal connection with Minnie Dean. My children's maternal great-great-great-grandmother was her aunt, Granny Kelly, formerly Christina Niven, née Swan, who was Invercargill's first resident. And it was in fact her aunt's presence that brought Minnie Dean to Southland in the first place.
They hardly knew each other. Minnie had been her sister's 3-year-old daughter, Wilhelmina McCulloch, when Christina Niven set sail for Otago on the Philip Lang in 1847. But when Minnie's own life as an immigrant to Australia came unstuck 16 years later, with 2 illegitimate daughters to care for, it was to Southland and her nearest relative that she headed.
Wilhelmina McCulloch, Minnie's birth name, was born here in Greenock on the banks of the River Clyde in 1844. Her parents were John McCulloch, a railway engine driver, and his wife Elizabeth Swan, and they lived around about here at what was then 65 Ann Street in a smoke-blackened tenement row on the edge of town, mostly full of poorer families. Hers was a respectable background nonetheless, and even after her mother died and her father remarried, her home should have been a place that provided all the care and protection for a young woman available in Victorian Scotland. Something went wrong though. Impossible now to know what it was, except that Minnie took herself off to Tasmania as a 16-year-old.
There she got pregnant, not once, but twice, and with no husband on either occasion, must have become pretty desperate. Hence the move across the Tasman to a long-lost relative before the birth of her second child in 1863.
The neighbours were told that Minnie was a widow, Mrs. McCulloch, a way of cloaking the young unmarried mother's status with some respectability. She did in fact marry, however, in the end in 1872 to Charles Dean, a hotel keeper near Invercargill. They seem to have enjoyed a reasonable life until Charles's speculation in land brought them to bankruptcy in 1884. Their financial difficulties may well have been exacerbated by Charles's heavy drinking as well. But nonetheless, it was up to Minnie now to step up and add to the family's income. She did so by renting a small farm near Winton, but unfortunately it too soon failed.
By 1888, they were again on the brink of ruin, so Minnie started taking in children for hire. She became what was called a baby farmer, someone who would take in illegitimate children and help unmarried mothers avoid scandal.
Eventually, 25 children would pass through Minnie's hands at Winton, 6 of whom died. There were coroner's inquests for the first deaths from illness, but thereafter, Minnie had buried the babies in her garden to avoid further public scrutiny. Her furtiveness did her no good, however, attracting attention from her neighbours and from the police. And in 1885, she was arrested after an infant she had collected disappeared during the train journey to Winton. In the subsequent trial, Minnie was publicly demonised, attracting to herself a host of opprobrium from a society perhaps ashamed at the way it dealt with unwanted babies. She was duly convicted and hanged here on the site of what was the old Invercargill jail. Minnie Dean is the only woman ever to be hanged in New Zealand, but modern reviews of her case suggest she may actually have been the scapegoat for the social ills of her time, and that the children who died in her care may actually have been the victims of ill health or inappropriate medication rather than deliberate infanticide. Whatever the case, in death, Minnie became something of a bogey woman, a witch-like character with which generations of Southland children were frightened with outlandishly exaggerated accounts of her life. In reality, her story was much more prosaic and altogether sad. From our point of view, her story is really that of a young Scottish woman from a modest background who immigrated to the colonies to try and improve her position in life and ultimately failed to achieve that goal. 19th century New Zealand was a land of promise for sure, but not everybody succeeded here.